Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening today. We have I would say just a very special guest today in the sense that Mick Heinekamp is on the phone with me, and we're using voice over VoIP, and because he's down in New Zealand. And Mick is an incredible guy he was in our book. He has some extremely insightful and I thought educational pieces of advice and wisdom in the book. It was one of I just thought from just a practical perspective that there's just so many great pieces from that interview. So I'm really glad to have Mick, because Mick is, he started back in '99. He and his wife, they started Socorro Springs Restaurant and Brewery down in New Mexico, and a few years later they opened Eddie Line Restaurant and Brewery up in Colorado. So I thought it was cool already to be able to balance restaurants in two different states, but it gets even more interesting. They ended up selling the restaurant portion of Eddie Line, but expanding the brewery, and now they have an extremely successful and popular brewery in Buena Vista, Colorado. Eddie Line Brewery has done extremely well and continues to grow, and they just recently, in the last couple of years, had a big expansion. And so with all that, Mick and his family have moved down to New Zealand, and which is where he is now, and they're opening a Eddie Line Brewery down there. So, gosh, Mick, just what an interesting past you've had, and just thank you so much for taking the time to do this today.
Hey, welcome. It's a good time.
So here's Mick down in New Zealand. He's getting this all cranked out, and I want to talk to him about what's going on there for sure. But I want to go back first of all, Mick, because as I was mentioning before we got this started, one of the things that Mick did, Mick and Molly did when they started in Socorro Springs is they had a business plan that they had crafted, and they believed it was going to take them $1 million to get started with their business, with their restaurant. And not uncommon at all, but they wound up, and I want Mick to talk about this, kind of fill in the gap here and tell the story, but let's just say they started with $1 million business plan. They whittled it down multiple times after getting feedback, wound up with a $100,000 business plan, right? So they cut it, it was down to 10%, and then they opened for like $70,000 or whatever, so like 7% of what they originally thought. So Mick, talk a little bit about that, because that's one of the stories from all the stories of doing that book that just really, really stuck in my mind, and I've never forgotten that because I thought it was such a, gosh, the difference between doing it for $70,000 and, if you had to take $1 million and, debt to do that, it just probably made all the difference in the world about the success of your business there and your ability to grow and expand and everything else. So talk a little bit about that and how y'all came about to do that.
Well, it's pretty interesting because we're, over the years we've met a lot of people, and a lot of people who have similar dreams and want to open similar businesses. And one recently, some good friends of ours are still trying to pursue the dream of having their own business. They want to stop working their normal jobs and open up a small brewery and restaurant, and kind of following along with them. And it's been very similar to our story, and use some of their story to kind of reflect on where we went and where we came from. And the same thing, they're looking for a location, and initial glances, they have half a dozen solid locations where they feel their dream could survive. But all of them are going to require major remodels, a lot of investment, and the easiest route to a business plan is just to start with a lot of money. So they did this similar to us, let's just write a business plan, and okay, so it takes $200,000 of renovation. Great, let's just put it in there, and it's hard to find a bunch of used stainless to build your own little brewery, and so let's just budget in a brand new one. So there's another $250,000 for a brewery. And well, restaurant equipment, it's hard to sort out the good from the bad in terms of the used restaurant equipment market. So let's just order new restaurant equipment, and budget in another $300,000, for furnishings and restaurant equipment, and before you know, you're back to that $1 million business plan. And the reason it happens is because it's quick and easy, and I think all of us like the quick and easy solutions, and until reality comes knocking and puts you back a few steps when you can't get an investor because they realize that the second you open, everything's worth pennies to the dollar, and they don't want to take the risk on a new person. Bankers won't touch you, and when you're just starting out, and so all of a sudden you're with zero options. So, and that's kind of where my friends are at the moment. And so it says, well, you have to go back to your original business plan and look at where the pitfalls are and the big, you kind of think, kind of like in your Indiana Jones movies, you always have that big ball that's about to come pendulum in and crash in India. And the big thing in starting a business is that startup number, and you have to get it down. And it takes a lot of work to get it down. So for us, when we started our business, we had this great business plan. When I talked with bankers, and they pretty much laughed us right to their doors, to try again, and we're left scratching our heads. So we went back and instead of buying the building or paying for the renovations, we ended up volunteering with a guy who had an older building. Had dirt floors, had holes in the roof, but it was a nice historic building, and we just said, look, let us volunteer our time to, rehab it. I had a little construction experiences. And even though we did help a little bit, it was more just showing our dedication that where he ended up saying, all right, I'll renovate it, but how are you going to fund the rest of it? And we were at that, I think we were about 200,000 needed still, and he said, no, that's not going to work. You're not going to be able to pay for that. So we kept going along and found a way to put a small brewery together using old stainless tanks from dairies. We found a restaurant that had gone out of business and just bought up all their equipment. They had an auction, and all the stuff that hadn't sold was still sitting there. And there's a couple prep tables, a single door cooler, and a dough mixer. And, the guy said $4,500, take it all. No guarantees whether it's working or not. So, we are taking the risk, not the bank. So we took that and ended up being able to get almost all of the equipment working and selling off some of the stuff that we didn't need that we were able to get to work. And finally, just took that kind of guerrilla approach of, we will find a way to make it work, without throwing a lot of money at the problem. And I think we opened up, we had convinced the person who renovated the building to give us a small loan. I want to say $60,000-$70,000, and then we had personally put in about $20,000 off of credit cards, and took all of our furniture to a flea market, sold that off to get our opening money. But we got it done, and that's the bottom line. 6 months after we were open, a lot of the equipment that we had opened with had been replaced with newer, more reliable equipment. But the big thing is we're open, and is it the easiest way? No, but is it doable? Absolutely. And that's what I'm trying to convince my friends in New Mexico who are trying to get their place open, is like, just open it. Find a way to get it open. Focus on the quality of the food and focus on the quality of the experience, not the price tag of the equipment that you're using. And they're back at it, and I think they'll make a run out of it. So just perseverance and spending the most money isn't always a solution.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like almost the easy way out. It would make it a lot easier to just go buy the new equipment and so on and so forth. But then you've got this huge amount of debt you've got to service, right? So all of a sudden you've got, it takes you many, many more years to really turn the restaurant into something that's a profitable venture.
Well, it's as simple as what we've learned over the years is a safe number to use for business planning in a restaurant is use 30% for your cost of goods. you can use 30% for your labor, 30% for your overhead, and that's going to include debt service, and then that would leave you 10% profit. So if you take that number, and let's just say you do $1 million in sales, because it's just easy numbers to work with, that would generate you $100,000 of profit. Reality is, for sure, when you're going to open, if you're a small place of less than 100 seats, you should be around $500,000 sales or 50,000 profit. Well, if you're successful and you get your cost of goods down to 25% and you get your labor costs down to about 25%, that frees up another 10%, which is great. But those aren't given, and starting up, you don't want to hurt yourself by skimping on quality on your ingredients. You don't want to skimp on service by not having enough staff. So you're right back to that, 10% of profitability, which might seem a lot, but you're going to have to reinvest into it. So then if you take your debt service and you put it at $1 million, it's going to be nearly impossible to keep your overhead at that 10%. I mean, just the interest payments alone on that are going to be, let's say it's a note at $1 million, interest payments on that are going to, be right around that $6,000 a month mark, $72,000 for the year. You're already 10% right there on interest. That's all your profit. So now you're just working there to pay interest. You don't have any funds left over to reinvest or to save for a rainy day, and you're immediately weaker, from day one. Whereas if you can start, small and you don't have that payment, hopefully you can maybe, have 30% cost of goods, 30% labor, and keep the overhead down to 20%, which gets you a 20% profit, which allows you to further reinvest, start running leaner until you really get your operation tuned and you get the other numbers down to 25 and 25. And now all of a sudden we're running at a 30% profitability, which is a great number.
Absolutely. So well, let me ask you this now, and that particularly is useful if you're going into it for the first time. You then went and opened how many years later was it that you opened Eddyline after you had from when you opened Socorro Springs?
All right, we opened up Socorro Springs in a leased building, the building that we helped renovate and get started in. When we got close to our 5-year anniversary, our dream initially was to open a brewery in Colorado. That's what we really wanted to do. But I couldn't get work there. Bankers wouldn't touch us, and I was able to get a work as a geologist in Socorro. So that's why we went with Socorro, and we were able to get the location to work for us. So after about 4 years, we started looking at Colorado again, and started talking with bankers and everybody else, and it was too big of an expansion to go from New Mexico to Colorado, and they couldn't justify it. And they said, look, you're in a lease building, you have no assets. Your Socorro business could close any minute. If your lease goes away, it's too risky. They said if you had some hard real estate, and your business would, was in a building that you owned, it'd be a lot better. So we expanded our business there by buying a piece of land, building our own building. And we ran into the same problems that we did from day one of, it's easy to hire an architect and have them design a $5 million building, and once again, spec it out with the latest and greatest equipment and you're way over budget again. So we ended up having to take the same approach to that building, and we ended up building it for about $750,000 from the $5 million that the architect had said it would cost us. And so we're at $100 a square foot for commercial building, which is really low. And by doing that, we're largely our profitability was high, because we had kept our costs down on the building and on the building that we actually owned. The second we closed that SBA loan there, we started working on Colorado. And we, that, which was right coming into 2008, we had obtained a letter of credit. We were ready to go. We found the location we wanted to build our own building at. And then all the markets started tanking. So we had a letter of credit from Lehman Brothers. Then we had one from Wachovia. And as we know, they all went down. And finally I found a local bank, though, that was able to step in last minute before we're going to lose the property we're going to build on. And ended up building there. But due to that whole kind of credit crunch, we weren't able to borrow as much as we wanted. And we ended up having to, really be really aggressive on our costs going into Colorado as well. And we ended up building that building for, it's closer to, $200 a square foot mark, but, still well below other commercial building costs in the area.
So you, wow, man, that's, when you talk a little bit about, you have an architect telling you, so the $5 million architect estimate, that was in, was that, I got confused, was that in Colorado or was that in New Mexico?
That was in New Mexico.
Okay, that was in New Mexico. So you had to get the building there. That's why you had, okay, got it. Well, then, We'll talk about that. You have some construction experience, but what advice would you give to somebody that maybe is going, okay, we're going to build, our building or whatever, and maybe they already own a restaurant or whatever, but, if you've got somebody telling you it's $5 million and you don't have construction experience, what are some things you can do to get that cost down? You ratcheted it down tremendously, but even there in Colorado, you got it 200 a square foot. So what are some things you can do, some practical things you can do to avoid overpaying if you're going to do a build out?
That's an interesting question. The thing that we keep finding everywhere we've gone, including here in New Zealand, is everyone, the easiest fix to a problem is to throw more money at it. So you meet with an architect. The architect's instant solution is to spec out the highest end equipment to, hire contractors that they don't have to babysit at all. So they'll design a building and they'll say, okay, we're going to use the latest and greatest air handler, and we want to make sure it's going to work just fine. So for the air conditioning in the building, we're just going to oversize it by 50% because, it's too hard to engineer it to be exactly what you need. And instead of us actually talking with a contractor of what we need, let's just hire an engineer, and let them run up a $30,000 bill to design the air conditioning. And then it goes into plumbing. I'm like, well, we don't want to design our whole plumbing system. Let's just hire another engineer for that. And so, like going back to First Springs when we built our first building, one of our bankers, recommended these architects. And we met with them, and they came out with some beautiful sketches, and it's really easy to get excited about everything. Like, yeah, this is going to be our new place. It's going to be the best ever. Man, this is great, And we had told them our budget from up front, which was based on the conversation with the banker, based on our projections, what they felt we could comfortably borrow. And architects don't care about that. We found a few over the years that, actually will pay attention to what something costs. Architects want to put they want to build the fanciest, most expensive premise out there so that they can say, yeah, I designed that. So what we started doing is questioning them. They came back to us after the first kind of sketches and designs. Well, this, you're looking at about 7,500 square feet. It's going to be, about $5 million. That's just what things cost to build. And I was, well, where are those numbers coming from? So they didn't want to break it down really, but finally we just, they gave us kind of a real rough spreadsheet of some other projects, and one of the big fees in there is engineering. And it was just massive, It's just like they wanted to spend about $200,000 in engineering. And I'm like, what are you getting for that? You're just getting some paper, And so we went to our, a couple of different contractors, plumbing people, and plumbing mechanical contractors, and said, why does this have to be so incredibly, why do I spend all this money on engineering? What do you guys really need to pull a permit? And that's kind of funny. The plumber said, well, personally, as soon as, if we were to get this job, we would take those engineered drawings, pump them up, throw them in the trash, because the engineers are going to design it the way they want to design it, but it's not the way you build it. And you kind of look at it and it's like, well, what if we spent 50 grand on these drawings? Would you really do that? And it's absolutely, because we have to be responsible for it at the end. And it doesn't make sense. We can build it, like if we're building a school, we would build it to those specs, and half the time it works right and half the time it doesn't, but that's not our problem, because we'll just throw more money at it to fix it. So, what you want to do is, you can tell your architect that we're going to have it designed by the contractor, and it's like, our name's going to be on it. We're going to build it so that it works, and we're going to be held accountable that it works, regardless of who drew it. So that was the first wake-up call. And then we started looking at other, you see that and kind of get a wake-up call, and you start, okay, well, what other parts of this project, where's this money going? So you look at, and you had this line item for lighting, and it was in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. And it's, well, how can this possibly be? What kind of lights are these? And so they start. You look at one of their pictures. They have these hanging pendant lights. They're $750 each. And there's like 50 or 60 of them throughout the building. Like, wow, it doesn't look anything different than the light. And you pick up at the local big box store, Home Depot or Lowe's or whatever else, where actually those lights are even nicer. Or get on the internet and you can find nicer lights that are $30 each instead of $500 each. And you tell the architects that, and they don't want, they don't want to do that. I don't know whether they get a kickback or what, but they don't want to play that game. They don't want to, have things bought locally. So finally, after going through this exercise, the architects were incredibly frustrated with us, and we had, but at that point in the stage, we had a basic set of plans for the building. And we just told them, look, we don't want to go any further with this. You guys want all kinds of engineers. We've already found that we don't need those. We don't want to go any further with this. We're just going to take your floor prints. We're going to go to a builder. So then we started meeting with builders. We have a basic set of plans, a basic floor plan. So basically, relations to what we want. We want you to you do a design build, as it's called, where they give us a number, they come back and say, look, based on this floor plan and elevations, I can build it, this is how we're going to build it, and this is what it's going to cost. And, when I think we talked about 5 different builders, and we connected with one of them who was on board with not overbuilding this and leaving their mark on it, but just building us what we wanted. And then ended up being a great building, so we got it done. It's beautiful. Funny story is that, about a year and a half after it was completed, the head of the owner of the architect firm, he came in for lunch, and he's like, wow, you actually got it done, and it's beautiful. I never would have imagined it, and he couldn't believe what we built it for, and so I guess the kind of lesson of the story is question everything. If you want to build something for less, whether it's your entire restaurant or just a building, you can build it for less than what the standard norm is. If you want to take the easy route out, you can have an architect that manage the whole thing. They'll spend all your money before you even have anything to show for it. Or you can take ownership of it and take control of every last little detail and pay attention to every little detail. And you can make it come out for how it needs to come out. I don't know if that helps anybody.
Yeah, this is extremely valuable advice, man. I mean, what it really comes down to is being willing to, like you said, to question and to go, well, don't just assume that just because they're a great architect or whatever that, do you have to listen to what they're saying and do it their way. I mean, this is really going through and rolling up your sleeves and going through what I'm sure seems like painstaking detail, going through this and the questions. And you just want to get open and get your place going. And so then, this takes time and it takes investigation, but goodness gracious, like if any story doesn't emphasize that point and hammer it home, I mean, this is it right here. In fact, folks, so if you're listening, go look at Socorro Springs Restaurant and Brew House. Socorro Springs. It's in New Mexico. There's images on Google. It's a beautiful building. It was done, so what a great story. What a great example of just having the wherewithal to say, hold on, time out. Let's fully explore this. And it's easy, I think, to fall into that process, of just going, okay, well, this is what we have to do. And so now we got to go spend this amount of money, and it's just easy on everybody involved, except for you, who's footing the bill for many years. So that's really awesome, Nick. Are you, one of the things I remember you also told me, correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember you had a mentor, at least at some point early on, and you thought it was important to have somebody, it sounds like you're doing some mentoring yourself right now. So talk about, sort of the importance of mentoring or having a mentor as you're getting started, in the business.
Yeah, I think that's totally critical. We'd be Molly, my wife and I, definitely kind of stumbling around blindly in the beginning, and after we had, on about our fourth or fifth rejection of our idea, we were traveling through Colorado up to the Great American Beer Festival. This was in, probably 1996 or 7, before we opened in 99. And we had heard that there's a guy there who had started a very successful chain of small breweries and restaurants called Il Vicino, I-L space B-I-C-I-N-O. And this guy's name was Tom Hennessy. And we had heard from a couple of different breweries that we've been, talking to as many people in the industry as possible, trying to learn information, and most of the places have these, $500,000 brewery setups. So this one guy said, well, if you really think you're going to end up going down the dairy equipment route, which I think is totally crazy, talk to this guy, Tom Hennessy. He put out some video that's out there. And that's all, before the internet really got going. But he said, there's this video out there called How to Start a Microbrewery, for less than $20,000 called Franken Brew System. So, immediately we're like, wow, maybe we can do it after all, and so we went on our way up to our first Great American Beer Festival. We went up and we found this guy, Tom Hennessy, and that was in Salida, Colorado, about 20 miles from where we opened up in Buena Vista. And anyhow, we met with him, and yes, he did have the video, and he sold it to us, a little VHS tape. But then he met with us for about an hour and gave us a ton of great advice, from just menu design to running your own restaurant successfully. And he recommended us, to read this book called The E-Myth by Michael Gerber, and really just, how to manage a restaurant versus working in a restaurant, and then we just, throughout the years, we'd come across challenges and shoot out a phone call or an email to him and say, hey, Tom, have you ever dealt with this before or that? And he's given us a lot of help and over the years, and likewise, we've, helped a lot of people, over the years now, and, a lot of people who have opened their own places. And Tom's running he does kind of a course now up in Ridgeway, Colorado. He has a Colorado Boy brewery there, and he teaches people how to, pretty much do exactly what we've done, how to start, very simply, how to get your place open. And there's State Brewing Company in Prescott. They went through his course. There's a lot of breweries around the country that have used him as a mentor, and you can see it in their businesses because they run lean. The quality's never compromised. The service is, top notch. These businesses have just a really great vibe to them, and they're successful because they're focused on the ultimate customer experience, not on how much money you can throw at a problem. And it's really cool, having learned quite a bit from him, and then we implemented it, and it's kind of funny because he came back to us. He wrote some articles and he referenced us because we took his concepts and kind of took them to another level, and it's interesting, once you figure out that you don't have to take what's, the norm out there for how to do something, it really opens up a lot of possibilities.
Yeah, I would echo that. I mean, we share, I think you and I have talked about it. We share a lot of the same business philosophies with how we how we run schedule flying. They're a really, really lean organization, and kind of have not done a lot of things that, sort of a conventional thing to do if you have a software business. We're not salespeople, and we don't have a marketing team, and we don't do partnerships, and so on and so forth. So it really is. I'll tell you what, man, it's funny because the E-Myth, folks, check that book out. I mean, you're one of, gosh, I think there were at least two other owners from our book that had read the E-Myth and were, very high on it. I know Matt Fry in Carmel, Indiana, with Bub's Burgers and Ice Cream. He talks a lot about the E-Myth. He's mentioned to me several times over the years, and somebody else. So, I've never read the E-Myth, but I've heard great things about it. Sounds like a really good one for people to pick up.
Yeah, I mean, just to summarize it, essentially it says, imagining a business as a triangle. If you're down working, in that triangle, the top managers are higher up on the triangle, and the people working at the bottom, are at the base of the triangle. And even though, as an owner, you should be able to do all the tasks within that triangle, it's important to keep yourself at the top of it, looking down, because otherwise you don't have perspective. If you're at the bottom looking up, you don't have perspective. And so for us to have gone from New Mexico all the way to Colorado, and then from Colorado to New Zealand, the only way we could have done it is if we maintain that perspective. And the second part of the book that it really beats home to you is trust your employees. You have to, at some point, you have to stop micromanaging. You have to let go. You have to give them trust. And most people inherently want to do a good job at whatever they do. And once you have trust in somebody, just let them run with it. And how they accomplish getting there is up to them. If you micromanage it, you're back to the bottom of that triangle. You're back in the trenches, and you're not seeing that perspective. If you're setting standards, you're keeping the perspective. You're at the top of the triangle, and then it's really fun, because you can free yourself up to keep growing, keep expanding, keep chasing new adventures, and your business will keep moving forward and being successful.
Those things kind of are mutually exclusive. To stay at the top of the triangle, you kind of have to have trust and let to keep that perspective. You have to. Those you kind of come hand in hand, don't they?
Totally. You have to delegate, and you're the one who's building the business. You have the vision. You have the ideas. Once that, let's just go back to day one of us starting up. So we had the vision. I knew how to make the beer. I knew how to make our pizza dough. So Molly and I sit there and we hammer out these recipes together with beer and food, and it takes a lot of time. But once it's done, once your dough recipe's done, it's done. So at that point, make a clear sheet of exactly how you want it made and the standards it needs to be made to, and then train someone on it and be done with it. The second you've got someone else trained on it, now you're free to go do something else, which is focus on the customer. Once you've got that whole customer experience of how we're going to handle, the customer experience, make sure that's being done well, pass those duties off to, your best server, and eventually you can promote them to a manager, which frees you up so that, the customers are getting taken care of exactly how you want them taken care of, but now you're not worrying about them, so you're free to look at the next perspective, which is, hey, let's look at, how we can bring more customers in. And every time you delegate one of these tasks, it frees you up to do more, so it's really a story of leverage, and you can, you become more and more valuable to the business the more tasks you delegate away. And once you figure it out, and we see it a lot with the newer managers, so we'll get busy on the floor, and instead of them managing the staff, they'll jump in and just say, out of my way, let me show you how it's done. Well, now who's managing the shows, So we teach our managers how to, follow the exact same philosophy, and when we try to get them to read the book, not a lot of people don't like to read, but it's a short book, it's easy to read, read it once and move on, and you'll be a lot more successful because of it.
That's great. So that's really cool. That's good advice. So definitely check that book out. I want to ask you one more thing. I want to respect your time. We've talked for a while. Nick, you should bottle this up, man. I mean, like, you had Tom Hennessy videos back in the day, like probably VHS cassettes, and it was probably the distribution was probably tough for him. Your everything we've talked about is so useful and practical, and easy to follow, and man, I mean, this is such great advice. Like, I can't imagine, I would want to hear all of this if I was starting a restaurant. I'd want to spend, 3 hours on the phone with you, and then I'd want to, call you once a month or something like that. Like, you really have a great way of articulating this. You've really uncovered a lot of just, very, like I said, very practical, tactical, intelligent things to do to be successful in the business that so many people have a hard time with, man. So, I tell you, man, you could charge, you ought to charge to do this podcast. It's great advice. It really is. One last thing I want to ask you about is, you mentioned, one of the things I think that you told me, before was that you can really dominate in small towns. Of course, we did this. Gosh, it's been almost 4 years, and we did the best. Almost 4.5, 5 years since you and I probably did that interview. But do you still feel like small towns are a place where you can do really well? Sort of, I guess, maybe big fish, small pond. Is that what you're doing in New Zealand, or talk a little bit about that?
I guess I'd have to say we still do believe that. It's kind of like it is exactly the same story, like, going with the throwing money at a problem. It's easy to look at a big market, say, look at a town of 100,000 versus 10,000. You crunch the numbers on the 100,000, you say, okay, per capita income here's 50,000 times 100,000. Man, look at the size of this market. If we only get 1% of that, we're killing it. And it's just looking at big numbers. It looks easier, but what's hard to think about is if you open up in a small town versus a large one. In that large one, they've seen everything come and go. You're going to get lost in it. It's harder to be unique. It's harder to maintain a separate identity. It's harder to stand out. And the flip side is if you're in a small town, the potential number of customers is a lot smaller, and the focus is on you because you're going to make waves coming into a small town, and so you really have to have your game on. But like here in New Zealand, Nelson is a big town. It's got about 60,000 people here, and we're actually in a town next to it with 10,000 people called Richmond, and we're not in the main downtown corridor of Richmond. We're actually about 3 kilometers out of town, right on the absolute edge of it. And when we started looking at this location 3 or 4 years ago, what we did is we found a person who had a commercial lot, and he was willing to. He's also a builder, and he's willing to build a suit. So he wanted to throw out a lease number, which is a little crazy for us, and and we're leasing this time because we're not residents here. He threw this number out, and we said, no, this isn't going to work. We need this number to be low so we can keep our costs low. So how about this? We base a lease, let's base it on what it's going to cost you to build. And we're going to help you design this building, so it's going to be really affordable to build. And we started moving onwards, and as we went on, a lot of people came up to us that we've met here, and it's crazy that you're not building in the main, downtown corridor, but it's also genius, and we chose it because there's several bike paths there, there's that intersect there, there's an aquatic center nearby, and it's next to a bunch of neighborhoods, and so not being even in the small town, but being on the very edge of the small town, I think is going to work tremendously great for us here, and we're several months from opening, but the feedback we've gotten is very positive, and what it is if we're in the main downtown corridor, we'd just be another business kind of lost in the sea of other businesses, and we'd have to spend a lot more on marketing and everything else. Because we're on the edge of town, we're highly visible, because there aren't any other type of businesses like what we're doing there. It's got everybody's attention. It's close to the neighborhood, unlike the central business district, and real estate costs are lower, cost to build are lower. Just kind of like in a small town versus a large city, your costs are lower. So do we believe in it? Absolutely. Looking at Colorado, where the number of breweries is exploding through the roof, and almost all of them are in the front range on Denver, Colorado Springs, Fort Collins corridor. And there's a ton of small towns still out there in Colorado that we drive through, and you're salivating. It's like, man, you could open up a really cool little brew pub restaurant here and be hugely successful. You'd be appreciated by the community for giving them another venue. You could build a really strong local loyal following, which is harder in the larger cities. Real estate costs are a fraction of what they are in the larger cities. So yeah, we're still very firm believers, in looking at your smaller markets, and I think that just kind of looking back at what's made us most successful is that it's not the number of people within a certain radius of you. It's all you need is one good solid community to get behind you and your goal. So look for communities, not population centers.
Look for communities, not population centers. I like that, man. Well, Mick, I could ask you 1,000 other questions, but I'm going to let you go. I know you're busy. But thank you again very, very much for doing this, for your time. And just, yeah, man. I mean, this is it's awesome stuff. It really is. And I really do appreciate it. And I think your story is so inspiring. And I think that's awesome that you guys have your family down there in New Zealand. And I mean, what a great example. You don't have to be, you've got a place in New Mexico, Colorado, and now New Zealand. So really, folks, what a great story. What awesome, just easily replicatable advice, from Nick. And, hey man, thanks a lot. Thanks for just the relationship and the time today and everything else, man. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, I hope it helps somebody else, and it's fun business and it's fun lifestyle. So definitely hope other people are successful with it too. So.
Good stuff, man. Well, you guys take care, and good luck with everything, and just let's stay in touch, my friend.
That sounds great. Cheers. Bye.
All right, cheers. Thanks, man. All right, bye.